So it's kind of been a crazy holiday kind of time with a lot of rain. Normally holidays, it's like, let's go to the beach, let's hang out, let's go places. But it's like, it's rain. You just want to stay at home. So over the holidays, Eva and I became addicted to watching Taskmaster. For those that don't know what Taskmaster is, it's a slightly irreverent game that has 5 comedians that pit themselves against each other in these tasks that are devised by someone that just loves to be cruel to people. Like, they're stupid and insane and crazy and impossible and just wonderful. And as a youth pastor, I watch and I go, how can I recreate this? Like, how can we make this happen? Like, but they have, like, yeah, it's just too hard, but it just made my heart happy. But my favorite task, and there is a point to this, was a game called Shoe Who. Shoe Who. And you'll be wondering, why are there shoes on the stage? They're our shoes from home. I just thought that would be cool. You can look at them and go, yeah, that's about shoes. Shoe Who. It's like Guess Who, which was my favorite game as a kid because it had a card on it with my name spelt correctly. So it was like, that means a lot. But Shoe Who. The setting was an old church, and every pew and the altar and every beam had shoes on it, shoes hanging from it. And the objective was to find the shoe that the taskmaster was thinking of. And you had to do it in the fastest time with the least amount of questions. Every time you asked a question, you had a point added. And once you kind of thought, oh, this isn't the shoe, you just throw it out the window until you had one shoe left, the one shoe. And I think deep down, all of us want to share our faith and we want to talk to someone about Jesus. We know that rescued people rescue other people, and we know we're called to be disciples who make disciples. We know we're meant to be a light on a hill and shining so that everyone around us can know that God's good and real. But we can look around us and see all the people and all the possibilities and all the options and all the places. And sometimes it can feel like trying to find the right person to talk to feels like you're in a room of shoes trying to figure out what shoe is the taskmaster thinking of. Like, does that shoe have laces? Is it a sports shoe? Is it a man's shoe? Like, is it sitting on a pew or hanging from the rafters? Like, is that at my workplace or at my dance class, or is it at the gym, or is it my neighbor? And how am I going to know it's the right one? And in the game it was hilarious because they were asking these questions. One goes, is this a shoe you would wear to a funeral? I'm like, that's quite subjective. And the guy said, maybe. And the guy threw the right shoe out the window. And I was like, it was brilliant. It was so good. Such a great move. But finding people that are open to God, who might be open to God or hearing our story, can feel sometimes as confusing and daunting as that game, is finding that shoe to please the taskmaster. Because I think we're worried we're going to get it wrong. And I think we're also worried maybe we'll get it right. I also want to point out that we are also the ones that Jesus wants to disciple. We're not just finding somebody else for Jesus to work on. You work on my friend Jesus. You work on my husband or my wife. You work on my kids. Oh my goodness, they need you, God. You work on my boss. Whew, he needs you. Like, come on, God. We need to be discipled. We are disciples. And we need to know God. We need to know what he has to say. We need to hear his voice. So in this process, we're not just telling somebody what to do. We are inviting somebody else along for the ride with us. And maybe we're just a bit further down the page. Maybe we just know a little bit more. But we're inviting them on this process. See, God has given us a mission to go into all the world and make disciples. I love that you talked about that verse about the laborers. That was our verse and our heartbeat for you today. Lord, send laborers and let it be me. It's mission possible, not mission impossible. And regardless of our personality, our profession, our age or our stage, we are called. If we call ourselves a Christian, it's tag you're it. So let's break it down. How do we go into the world, our world, and make disciples? The first thing we do is seek God. So the very first step in the process, to ask God, who can I talk to? Who can I share with? Because God is at work behind the scenes in people's lives. He knows where they're at. He knows what's going on in their life. He speaks their language. And as we draw near to God, he shows us his heart. You know, Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father doing. So many of the amazing encounters that Jesus had with people was because God had initiated it, and Jesus was in step with him to know it was the right time and the right person. In John 4, we read about such a moment. Jesus was traveling from Judea and he was going to Galilee, and it says in John 4 that he had to travel through Samaria. And that can just seem like one of those throwaway statements. It's just like, oh yeah, whatever, he's traveling. Of course he has to go through there. But when you dig in deeper, we see that Jesus was traveling with a different GPS. You see, when back in the day, you didn't go through Samaria if you were a Jew. There was this political, cultural thing that Samaria was like such a no-go. They were like cultural enemies, and you just avoided it like the plague. But Jesus had to go through Samaria. There was no other reason for him to go there apart from for this life-changing conversation that happens there with a woman at the well that not only changes her life, but her entire communities. Jesus knew what the Father's heart was, and he was in step with him. It made room for him to move. Another time is in Luke 19. And out of all the crowds, all the people wanting to see Jesus, wanting to have him at his place, wanting to be healed, wanting to have a miracle, Jesus soloed out one man, Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, short people problems. He was up a tree. I feel him, I'm with him. And he wanted to see this man that everyone was talking about. Who is this Jesus? What is he about? And Zacchaeus, Jesus saw Zacchaeus in the tree and said, Zacchaeus, come down. I must stay at your house. I'm like, how did Jesus know his name? I mean, Jesus didn't stalk him on Facebook or anything. I mean, how did he know? But I believe it's because the Father had initiated it, and Jesus was listening and saw him and made the next move. You know, our brains are wired to look for and notice the things that we're looking for and noticing for. We just got a new car. It's very exciting. It's a Toyota Aqua with a shark fin. And so now as I drive around, I'm like, oh, look, there's an Aqua. Hey, the Aqua's got a shark fin. Hey, car buddy. We're like, yay. And it's like my brain has rewired that I can now see an Aqua from anywhere, I feel. I spot the Aquas. I mean, the Aquas were there before. There were always lots of Aquas driving around with their cool shark fins. I just didn't notice them, but now I'm more in tune to notice them. And so if we are praying every day for that opportunity to share with someone, then our brains are going to be more in tune to look for them and spot them. We can ask God, who can I talk to today? Who should I sit with at lunch today? Is there something you want to do with me today, God? And God might drop a name in your mind. Don't discount that name. It could be a random thought, or maybe you've had too much coffee, but it could be God speaking to you. And because God wants to do something, you asked him a question and he will answer. Like at botany, you say, God, who do you want me to speak to? As he felt, pray for someone in a grey jumper, and the person just was right there. That person was there. Another group I was in, Connor saw a picture of a candle. So we went to Bed Bath & Beyond because it's like that's where they sell candles, and had a great conversation with the family there. If our identity says that I am someone that is a disciple, I make disciples. My identity is I'm someone who makes disciples. I'm someone who shares my faith, and then we'll be wanting to do it more. We'll be wanting to live that out and take the opportunity. And knowing God's heart for people, you know, generally, he wants people to be saved. He wants no one to perish. He wants no one to be lost. And for individuals, helps us to be on mission with him. In the same passage as Jesus meets Zacchaeus in Luke 19, verse 10, it says, Jesus says, I came to seek and save the lost. You know, lost people are on Jesus' mind. They're his thing. They're his purpose. And if you were to say to Jesus, what's your why? He would say, lost people. This is his heart. And if you're talking to him more and more, you'll know his heart. I have a question for you, Analia, because you know me, and we know each other, eh? Pretty well, we work each other. If I was to ask you what shoe you think I would be thinking about, what shoe would be my favorite, what shoe would be on my mind, any shoe up here, what do you think it could be?
I would say it's the white ones you wear, right?
That's right. They're my favourite shoe. And Anna-Leah knows that because actually all week I just would be like, hey, Anna-Leah, I just need to tell you, these are my favourite shoes. And she's like, okay. Caleb was like, have you got a birthday or something coming up? Like, are you asking for more shoes? I'm like, I just need you to know because we know each other and you know my heart. These are my favourite shoes. She knew my heart. So when I asked her, she knew it. Same with God. When we know his heart, we can ask him and he'll reveal. And we'll know because we know his heart. Super cool. The second thing we do is we start to sow. And the important word there is start. One of the points I've been loving in the book Atomic Habits that we're reading as a staff, and I really feel we should be getting kickback from this because both Peter and I have mentioned, and Judy did, and Pukekohe as well. When we start a habit, we don't have to be an expert at it. We just have to start. Most people that become concert pianists, they don't start with a perfect rendition of a Mozart concerto. Normally it's chopsticks or the scales. Most people, when they learn to start to drive, they're not at Lewis Hamilton's level. They're not. They bunny hop, and it's okay. And you don't become a 5-star Michelin chef when you're in food tech at intermediate, or when you go flatting. At least I didn't. We start, and we learn, and we grow, and we improve. And in the same way, being a disciple who makes disciples is all about just starting. Having that first conversation. Having that first moment where you say to someone, oh, this may sound a little weird, I'm a Christian. That first moment where you step out, throwing out, oh, what'd you do on the weekend? Oh, I went to church, it was really cool. That can be a really big deal, and it can be a really great start. Small steps that as we repeat them, become part of who we are and what we do. And the more time we repeat those steps, these small steps, the more times we just start, the more proficient we become and the bigger steps we start to take and the easier it gets. The first flight by the Wright brothers was in 1903, and that led to an epic flight 66 years later that landed man on the moon. Small steps led to great steps. And our identity shift is that we don't have to wait for angels in the sky or signs from heaven or booming voices from the clouds and choirs and saying, this is the one, this is the one, go to the one. We just start in our everyday life with everyday conversations that include that we're Christians and we believe that God's real. This week we're going to sit beside or have lunch opposite or be in a cubicle next to or on the sidelines watching our kids play sport with people that God's love. People that God, adores. People that Jesus died for. And he positioned us there on purpose with a purpose to be a person that's brave enough to just believe he's real. And brave enough to believe that he'll do what he says he will do. And that knowing him is worth it. And being brave enough to step out so that God will step in. And by the way, brave is doing it vulnerable. Doing it kind of scared. Doing it kind of like unsure, but doing it anyway. We just start. In Acts 1 verse 8, it says that the Holy Spirit will come upon us and live within us and give us power to be his witnesses. We're not in this alone. God doesn't say, tag you're in and then just throw us in the deep end, and though it can feel like it, he gives us the right words and the right conversations and the right moments and the right things to do. So many of our conversations yesterday at Botany, we got out the, hi, my name is, and this will feel a little bit weird, but I'm a Christian, and then you're like, oh, they didn't tell us what to say next. What do I say next? And we talked to this girl in the shop because they were playing Taylor Swift, and she was by herself, so we had to go in. It's the rules. And so we get there and I was like, hi, my name's Claire. This will be a little bit weird, but I'm a Christian. And I just really felt, to encourage you that, I don't know if you're a Christian or have a church background, but I really felt that if you ever need God that you can just pray, you can just call out to God, you can just say whatever. He knows you and he sees you and he will be right there. She's like, oh, wow, I'm not a Christian, but wow, that's really cool. And it was awesome. And then a customer walked in and said, oh, you've got a customer. She's like, no, carry on. I was like, okay, sure. So we had this great chat, but it was kind of like you get to that first point, you're like, oh, what do I say next? But the Holy Spirit was right there. As much as it helps us identify people who might be open to talking more about Jesus in a way, sowing is just like walking into a dark room and turning the light on. It's letting people in your circles of influence know that you're a Christian, you have a faith, you believe in God, and so that you're identified as someone that people might want to talk to, or if they've got questions, they can come to you. It is a team effort. We are links in the chain. We sow our seeds, we start, it's a process, we water, we tend, but God is doing the actual growing. Our job is to sow the seed, to start the conversations, to be out there and open, and it's God's job behind the scenes to be at work in that person's life. It's so cool. In Luke 8 is the parable of the sower, which is a really familiar passage if you've been a Christian for a while. But I love how you can read a passage and it just jumps out at you differently when you read it. And that's because, God's word's not just a book, it's not just history or wise sayings or things like that. It's God speaking to us personally through his words. And so up till then, I've always read about how, the sower sows the seed, and there's like the hard ground and the rocky ground and like the everything ground and the good ground. And I really thought about the ground. It's like, we need to make good ground and stuff like that. And, people do this and people do that and they respond like this. But it struck me as I read it, the very first phrase. You see, I've mostly read it in a version that says a farmer goes out to sow his seed. But this day, the version I read says a sower goes out to sow his seed. This was like an aha moment. The sower's purpose is to sow the seed. It's in his name. It's his identity. It's his calling. It's who he is. A sower sows seed. A sower doesn't write novels. They don't bake cakes, though Verona does. They don't build bridges. They sow seeds. It's who he is. A sower sows. You and I are sowers. We are called to sow seeds. And note this, the sower isn't the grower. The sower's full responsibility and job description is to sow the seed. And as the passage says, it's just going to sow wherever. It will grow wherever. But God's responsibility is to grow. And what does sowing seed look like? Sowing seeds done in our everyday life, with everyday real people being our everyday real self. It's ordinary conversations that become God conversations, sharing about how God is real in our life. Sowing can be asking someone how their weekend was, and then saying you went to church when they ask how yours was. It can be talking about how God helped you with a very real problem with a real answer. Sowing can be sharing something on your Instagram feed about being a Christian. One question that I found really easy, and it's kind of dorky, but for me it's really weird, is like, are you a church person? Because if they've had any history to do with church, they're like, oh yeah, when I was a kid I went to this church, or no, I just go at Easter and Christmas. I'm a church person, I go at Christmas and Easter. And that can be a conversation starter. Noticing someone's having a bad day and asking, are you okay? Is there anything I can help with? Starting small seeds that open the door for more conversation. And I think often we think that, an evangelistic opportunity or conversation has to be like 10 spiritual laws, 10 commandments, 4 spiritual laws, go through a tract, explain the whole gospel. But it can start out as a normal conversation. Super, super easy. We're sowers, empowered by the Holy Spirit with the power to sow. Let's be asking God every day, how can I sow? Where can I sow? Who can I sow to? Help me be a sower. The third thing we do is see where they're at. If you're sowing, having these conversations in your everyday life, you want to pay attention. How are people responding? You want to see where they're at. And as you go about sowing, you're seeking for someone who could potentially be interested in taking that next step and beginning a relationship with God. And some of the discipleship methods call this to be a person of peace. Now, a person of peace is someone that's open to hear what you have to say about God, and they're willing to begin a journey. A person of peace doesn't mean that they have their life together and they're a good person in the first place. It just means they're open, not argumentative, and that they're willing to explore, not explode. Yeah, think about the two people I've mentioned already. The woman at the well, she didn't have her life together. And Zacchaeus, he didn't have his life together. In fact, both of them were kind of rejected by their communities and their lives were falling apart. But they were looking for answers, and they were looking for hope. The type of answers and the type of hope that can only be found in God. You know, these people, you know, we're talking about starting small groups, discipleship group, hair groups, whatever we're going to call them, where you get alongside somebody and read the Bible with them and you just make it real. You know, inviting someone on the journey with you. It's not about you knowing more, about them knowing more, or passing on. It's like every day we're going to read our Bible. We're going to ask what God says. We're going to look for what he says. We're going to put it in our own words. We're going to apply it and do it. How amazing is that? And these people, for these small groups, these discipleship groups, could be right here in the building today, right here. The point of the groups is to become better disciples of Jesus. And then make more disciples of Jesus who know God and make him known, who live by his teachings and follow him. And that doesn't exclude the benefit it is to the person you might be sitting with right now. You know, we can all take it to the next level. We can all do a group with someone, and it can be a great way to start small, doing it with someone you know really well, so that then, and maybe in 6 months or in 2 months, you're like, yeah, I can do this. God, we could do this. I'm going to start a group at school. I'm going to start a group at work. I'm going to invite my neighbour over for coffee and chat to them. You know, it might be someone you work with or are at school with. Or your kids might know each other. You know, groups in this day and age also don't have to be in person. You can do a Zoom group or something like that online. You could even do it with someone who lives across the other side of the world. So how do we see where people are at and if they'd be a good fit for the process? In Shuhu, the contestants asked the taskmaster questions to narrow down the criteria for their choice. Is it a white shoe? Is it a man's shoe, a child's shoe? And in the same way, our conversations and questions can help us identify who might be a good fit or a good person for this style of discipleship. You know, we often think we need all the right words and the precise formula to win others. But in reality, people are really willing to tell you exactly where they're at and where they're at spiritually if we're willing to listen to them. People aren't projects. And to make this work, we actually have to care and be willing to work at making a connection. Asking questions assumes that we're not assuming we know what they believe or what they need. And genuine questions about their life experience, their hard times, and their family can go a long way in building trust and respect. Doing life with people matters. And the response we're looking for when they open up and start to talk about their felt needs, their pressure points, and begin to ask questions about God. They might have some church in their history. They have questions about whether it's really real. They might be looking at the world and seeing the brokenness and wonder, God, where are you in the middle of this mess? And the good thing about this process is we don't have to have all the answers. We can say, hey, look, let's see what God says about this. Let's open the Bible and ask God to speak. As we start this year with refocusing on being disciples who make disciples, who start to sow in our everyday lives with the people in our world, we're going to see the ripple effect this has, not only for the people who are open and ready to take that next step, but we see in us what happens when we step out and God steps in. There's nothing more awesome than being part of that link in the chain with someone's story of them coming to God. And I don't think we'll really see the impact that we will have until we reach the other side of this life. You know, this is how Jesus changes the world. If the band could come up. Last year I went with a bunch of people to Wakanda Forever. During the movie, at the other end from where we were sitting, there was this guy with a deep booming voice who gave commentary on certain people and characters and some Easter eggs. So like a character would come on and goes, oh, Ant-Man Quantania. Yep. Okay, that's the comic book costume, accurate. There's all these little things. And I know some people in the theatre, maybe were a little bit annoyed. We were probably far enough that it was just amusing. But I was really impressed at his level of knowledge, and it actually was just really funny. Something would come on, I'd be like, 1, 2, 3, there he is. There's the guy with his wee comment. For those that aren't Marvel fans, it could have been really helpful because it's just like a little, tour guide with you right there in the movie. But at the end of the movie, I was waiting with my kids. We were down in the car park and just chatting, and this random guy was just standing beside us. Next thing I know, this random guy is like, "Did you guys just see Wakanda Forever?" "Yeah, we did." He goes, "Oh, so how long have you been like Marvel fans? And did you blah, blah, blah?" Did you notice the connection between, no. And I was like, "Oh." We had a great conversation. But I left the conversation really challenged because he was a young guy that didn't know us, but was passionate about Marvel movies. And so he came and talked to us. This random guy started a random conversation with a group of complete strangers because he wanted us to know the cool stuff he knew. He was a Marvel disciple, making disciples, sowing seeds, starting conversations and seeing where we're at. And if we could give our lives to Marvel. What a challenge. He just did it. Yesterday, our young people just did it. And the challenge for each one of us is, am I going to do this? Am I a disciple who makes disciples? Am I going to take up the challenge this week to ask God on my way to work, God, is there anyone here you want to speak to? And how do I do it? Pay attention to what's happening in your lunchroom. Pay attention to what God is doing around your life. And then just do it. And that's the scary part. We often hear God go, "Oh no, pizza last night." No, not God. But it's God. He is speaking to you because you know Jesus. You know his heart. He loves you and he loves the people in your world, and you are positioned there on purpose. There are people that only you will reach if you will take up that challenge and say, "Yes, I am a disciple and I will step out and make disciples." Give it a go. We don't have to do it perfectly. We just need to start. When we step out, God steps in.